Sorry. All right, 7 o'clock. Let's call this regularly stated meeting to order. First order of business is a roll call. Katie, please collect roll.
Mrs. Melius. Here. Mr. Hoffman.
Here.
Mr. Updike.
Here.
Mrs. Mitchell. Here. Mr. Anderson.
Here. Very good. Thank you, everyone. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
So move.
Second.
It's moved and seconded for approval of the agenda. Any comments, questions, or additions? Katie, please collect the vote.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Updike.
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
And Mrs. Melius.
Yes.
Approved.
All right, thank you. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. Thank you, board members, for being here. Next item on our agenda is the Student Superintendent Advisory Council presentation. Dr. Burt.
Right. Well, we have an 8th grader here, Raya Falconrath. Can I say that right? Falconrath. And Raya, first of all, very brave because they're supposed to be a junior, and we think that maybe hopefully that she's doing okay, but she's not here. So Raya still decided to come up here by herself. I did throw in a little bit of backup so that she's not the only one standing up there. And
I was just going to look pretty, but she's got this.
But Raya is a very confident young woman, and I have absolute faith that she's going to share whatever she's got to share with you.
Hi, everybody. So the last couple of meetings, we have been covering a couple things. One of them is what do we want to do for like class schedules and stuff? What would we think could make them better? What could we do for the students to make it better? One of the questions Dr. Burke asked us was, what do you want this district to look like in 20 years? And there were a lot of answers, but one of them, he kind of brought it up too, was how, or maybe we can do schedules that can fit the student, because some of us struggle at certain things. Therefore, we can make a schedule that can focus more on like math or language arts or something that they need to work on more. So that might help us a little. That's just an idea though. School lunches, we've been talking a lot about those lately. It's a very hot topic there. Just covered a couple things. High schools are really happy with their peanut butter and jellies, so.
That's it. I think those are the things we talked about last time that we're going to continue this conversation.
Do you guys have any questions?
To go back, just to give you a minute to think. So actually it came from Mr. Updike's. The question to the students was, 20 years from now, what do you want the school to look like? And what are things that we really hold dear, that is very important and we need to make sure we need to hang on to? And what are other things that maybe we can let go of? What is things that maybe not as necessary? And so there was a lot of different discussion back and forth. A lot of the students said, we really need to think about this, take it back to our friends and talk to them. I think it caused some of them to pause because they, especially the seniors, they're gone in a couple months. So they're thinking more about their legacy and things that are very important to them. And the younger students are thinking about the immediate future. And so it went back and forth. They had quite a bit of discussion on different things, but one of the big things that Raya was correct is the students started talking about the schedules, and their idea was, if I'm really good at math, why do I have to be in a class for 45 minutes with math when I get it in 20 minutes? But I really could use that extra time maybe in English or science or something. And so we talked about being able to create specialized schedules that would fit the student specific needs. And then maybe give them time for more exploratory classes or different activities that they might want to do depending on their level of comfort. So it was a really, really good, rich conversation, but we will continue to have more. Mrs. Dalton was there, and so they have lots of questions about food. And so teenagers like to eat, and old guys like to eat too. So Mrs. Dalton was really good about sharing some of the things that are going on right now. The food supply is a struggle, and there's plenty of food, but it's trying to get the food from wherever they are in the warehouses to here. It's not as easy. And so the students have discovered that there's some foods they really, really like that's not being able to get here. And it's really not a lack of food, it's a lack of ability to get here. So she really good was explaining what's going on in the world right now. Some things that while there may be food, but it's hard to get from the distribution center to here. And so we even talked about some things that brainstorm on what we can do on that. But I know the seniors, or not the seniors, high school had prom on Saturday. And so we were kind of expecting a report on prom, but I'm assuming that we'll get one in the future. So I bought you enough time to ask whatever questions that you have to ask. Brian.
Well, this really isn't a question, but I think it's probably kind of a daunting task to ask people. To me, 20 years ago doesn't seem that long ago, but to all of you, you weren't even here 20 years ago. So I think that's probably a stretch to ask you to think of something that big, but I think it's good for you to be challenged to think about those things.
I did reach out to some of the sixth graders, and a lot of the ideas that came up were adding sixth grade sports, maybe, or giving them more extra curricular activities to do, because they feel like maybe being manager isn't really something they want to do. They want to actually do the sport. So that was definitely one of them.
One of the reasons I asked Dr. Burke to talk with you about that is it's a real challenge. It bends your brain a little bit. We tend to focus all of our energy on a 3 to 5 year strategic plan, and that's usually where things end, is at that 5-year period. I recently read a Harvard Business Review article that says only 2.4% of the population thinks about the future or spends any time contemplating the future. And so just you having spent the time that you did put you ahead of those of 97% of the world, right? And so it's important to always think about that, because when you're thinking of the future, and we as a board are challenged by that all the time, when you think of the future, organizations that are thriving right now, they're thinking about the future and the present. Those organizations that aren't thriving are not thinking about the future, they're only thinking about the present. And I think the input that the students have is critical to understand from their perspective what 20 years looks like. And there's no single one answer. That's the great thing about it, is it's virtually infinite. The number of responses and the number of thoughts you can have about the future. And so I think it's really important that we embrace that kind of future thinking, not only as a student body, but as a board, so that when we identify things that maybe need to happen in 10 to 20 years, we circle or we bring that back to the students and say, what do you think? What is emerging? What are you excited about? What's new that you're excited about? And what may be falling off and becoming a little more obsolete? And so it's important that we keep that mindset of 10 to 20 years. It's a long way out. As Mrs. Mitchell said, 20 years from some perspective, mine included, is the snap of the fingers, where someone that's in middle school, high school, elementary school, 20 years seems like a daunting task.
Yeah.
But even if it's 6 months or a year or 2 years, it's important to think about that. So I would encourage you to go back and challenge your friends and peers outside your friendship group as to what they think. And there's no wrong answer. That's the beauty of it. It's really up to us. But we need your feedback and ideas we come up with. We need to bring back to the students as well. So that's a little background of why I had him. I'm sure it was caught you off guard a little bit because we don't always talk about that.
Mhm.
Had you talked about the 10 years ago, if you talked to students in our district, my guess is that they wouldn't understand that we have 5 elementary schools, starting a 3rd at middle school, high school at 1,700 roughly.
1,000.
Or 1,000, okay, 1,700. I don't know where that number came from, but anyway.
3,700 total.
Oh, 3,700 total, right. And so thinking about, that was just 10 years ago. And so that's a massive change. And if we're all honest, sometimes it's a struggle to go through that much change that rapidly, but you have to have, administrators, teachers, staff that have that vision and have students' best interests at heart. So that's a little background as to why we asked that question, but I still think it's important to challenge ourselves to that.
Mhm.
So, any questions for us?
Not
Why are you
really.
asking about the future, or why don't we have some kind of different lunch selections? I think JC Dalton being able to be there and talk to you, she's our subject matter expert is what I'd call her, is she knows the ins and outs and the reasons why behind things. And so it's great that you could have a conversation with her.
And I think Raya can attest that there have been changes that the students have asked for that were made because it came directly out of that committee. So we want to give credit to the students too.
And we have those ice cream bars now. Those are a big hit.
Very good. Any other questions, comments?
I was worried you're going to ask her to predict the future for a minute.
Well, we could, but it's in, how would we know, right? But thank you. It took a lot of courage to stand up there. I appreciate that. I have a tremendous admiration for folks that can get up and stand in front of a board that were elevated up looking. So congratulations. I'm proud of how you've handled and carried yourself. Well done.
Well done.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to recognitions, Dr. Burke.
We're going to start with a really big, they're all really big and exciting, but this is something that doesn't happen very often in Spring Hill. So I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Hackney.
Good evening. This is huge. This has been a long time coming. We had the Teacher of the Year banquet recently. It was virtual. And every year we sit there and know it's our year, it's our year, and it hasn't been our year. We did know that Jessica Gazzano was a semifinalist, and we had to keep that little secret from her. So watching that, we knew she would be named a semifinalist. And when the time came to announce the Region 3 finalist, and mind you, Region 3 includes the big Johnson County schools, several of the Wyandotte County schools. So when the name for the secondary finalists for Region 3 was named, it was our very own Jessica Gazzano of Woodland Spring Middle School named the finalist. So it was a really great evening. She had a beautiful speech that brought a little tear to my eye. It was really beautiful. It is online if you want to see that, but we're just so proud of Jessica, her time here as an art teacher, moving from the elementary world to the middle school world, doing some great things for kids. Now, Jessica, I know you have family you'd like to introduce and maybe say a few words while you're up here.
This has been quite the honor and journey. It's been really great to have some time to kind of reflect on where I've been and kind of refocus on where I want to go. And this has given me the opportunity to do that. So it's been really fun. And also, I was extremely shocked when they said my name. So I wish that the camera wouldn't have been like so close on my face because it took me a minute to really let that sink in. I do have my husband, Nick Gazzano, with me tonight, and my daughter, Kinley Gazzano. They're my fan club. But I'm really honored and proud to represent Spring Hill. And so I'm excited to move on and see what's next.
Added number is this on? I just wanted to add a number. There's 286 school districts in the state of Kansas, and there are 8 teachers out of 286 districts that accomplish what you've accomplished. And that's an amazing thing to happen. We're very proud that you're from our district. So I think they're gonna.
I think we're getting a photo.
Oh, yeah, get out of the way.
We were trying to figure out, we think it's been probably at least 15 years since we've had a semifinalist. I can tell you, I go to those every year. This year was online, but I go to those every year, and it's usually Blue Valley and DeSoto over and over and over, or Shawnee Mission jumps in. So in 15 or in a 32-year career, 22 of it in Spring Hill, I've got to hear our name twice. So it was so great to hear it. And it was an incredible speech. So I highly, highly recommend if you get a chance to go see it. So great job, Jessica.
Yeah, thank you for representing us. I was sitting there in my living room on my computer with tears in my eyes listening to what you were saying, because it's been a hard couple of years. And I think if every educator could have that perspective that you had of just not knowing who's in your classroom, what future scientist or whoever it may be is sitting there, it really was inspiring. And so thank you for representing us so well.
So you guys are more than welcome to stay, but we're going to start bringing up some other people. So Beth Cooper from Wolf Creek Elementary School.
As principals, we always wish we could follow the really boring recognitions, and you never want to be the one who follows something really special like that was. So congratulations, Jessica and family. But tonight I want to say a word about our assessment team. We have started our spring assessment season. We all wish it wasn't a season, but it is kind of a season at Wolf Creek. And it takes many hands for that to go smoothly. And it's all under the leadership of our amazing instructional coach, Dr. Susan Teese. And she spends a lot of time scheduling, facilitating, preparing materials, coordinating with district to get that all to go well. Every day she has to print off access codes and get them to teachers. She monitors the children's progress on her computer, but she doesn't do it alone. Our teachers take it very seriously at Wolf Creek. We know that at any time we could have a monitor visit from the state. And so they're always up on their feet, making sure the kids are doing a really good job. And our kids take it seriously too. It's really a whole school effort. But I also want to mention that our paraprofessionals help in testing also. They monitor and proctor small groups. They work with individuals in the special education setting along with the special education teachers. So it sounds like maybe a small thing to get our state testing accomplished every spring, but it really takes all hands on deck. And I'm really proud of the effort that the staff brings. So want to thank them for that tonight.
Mika Bauer of Timber Sage Elementary School.
Good evening. Last week was National School Librarians Week, and so tonight I would like to recognize our librarian, Miss Marilee Thompson. Mrs. Thompson is truly a book whisperer. She hasn't yet met a kiddo that she can't turn into a reader. She works day in and day out to get our kiddos excited about reading. In fact, if you want to see some happy kiddos, just walk into the Timber Sage Library. She is constantly looking for new ways to engage kids in books and to engage our families, starting a new family book club this year that she's very proud of, and we've had great participation in. We're very thankful that she does her work at Timber Sage and truly brings that love of reading to every single child in our building. Thank you.
Jody Cole had a conflict tonight, so Tammy Endicott, Spring Hill Elementary School.
Good evening. I wanted to take a minute to recognize our counselor, Shelby Fleming at Spring Hill Elementary School. Shelby has a very tight schedule during her day, and she does counseling sessions with the classroom, but she also pulls a lot of students that are working through divorces and deaths in the family and some pretty heavy stuff. And so I just wanted to recognize her because she works really hard to always do what's best for our kids, and she's always available to them. Our kids love her, and we couldn't do what we do every day without her.
Darcy Sly from Dayton Creek.
Good evening. Tonight, I'd like to recognize our building leadership team. As it is our first year at Dayton Creek, they have a big job ahead of us, and together we're working on digging through the first year of data that we have and trying to decide what direction we need to go for our strategic plan. And so they've been right alongside me, helping with that, talking to their teammates, trying to figure out what it is that we need to do, where we need to go. And I really want to recognize them and tell them thank you because they've done a great job. Members of our team are Kathy Blanchard, Abby Robertson, Ariel Jankard, Julie McCutcheon, Josie Eklund, Peyton Paracola, Hallie Young, Melissa Vest, and Katie Smith. They've done a great job, and I appreciate all of their help.
Rod Spring, Woodland Spring Middle School.
It's kind of hard to follow the start of the night. First off, Raya, I mean, that just speaks for itself. The fact that an 8th grader can get up here and speak to the board the way she did. So proud of her and all of our Stallion Squad members. They've done a tremendous job. And also part of my recognition was Miss Jessica Gazzano. She has done a tremendous job and she's well respected by everyone. Students love her, staff love her, and our community really supports her in everything she does. And there couldn't be a more deserving person for this recognition. So we're really proud of her. A couple of groups I do want to recognize tonight. First off, this last week was National Paraprofessionals Week. And I think it would really be, I'd be mistaken not to mention our paraprofessionals. They do a tremendous job. They're the backbone of our school. There's so many things that we cannot do without them. And part of that builds on the relationships they build with kids. If you looked at our social media lately, you've seen posts of our paraprofessionals working with kids and just the smiles and the interactions you see, those are all natural, and kids love our paras. And it's because they really work hard to build those relationships, and it makes a lot of things possible for our kids to help lead to success for them. The second group I want to recognize are our music teachers, our orchestra, band, and vocal music teachers. We just held our Invitational Music Festival. It's back after 2 years, and it was awesome to see. We had about 1,000 people run through our building for that event, and it was a tremendous job, tremendously organized. And it was a great experience for everyone involved. And we were really proud. Our kids did awesome in the performances. And it was really exciting to see both Spring Hill Middle School and Woodland Spring Middle School kids do so well and perform so well. And that's because of the hard work that those guys do with our kids. Really proud of that. And then finally, I want to recognize Mr. Harwood. Zach Harwood, our assistant principal. The reason we can do events like that is because he does a lot of work behind the scenes to make them happen. From organizing, helping get judges and helping organize everything with that, the event, helping the teachers as they do those events, whether it's track, vocal music, instrumental music, or Scholars Bowl. He's heavily involved, does a tremendous job with that. And we're really proud of the work that he has done. And he does it, and he doesn't want to take any credit for it. He always sits behind the scenes, but he really deserves a lot of recognition for his hard work. So, thank you.
Trevor Gertson, Spring Hill Middle School.
All right. Well, good evening. I would like to first recognize not only our state assessment team. Our state assessments, as you guys know, it's been mentioned before, it is a great undertaking. It's not something that is just simply done. It takes weeks and weeks of planning. And so a lot of credit goes to Katie Sibbett, our instructional coach, Callie Weissel, assistant principal, and a lot of our front office staff as well have been really involved in helping get the process going. And then, of course, you have your ELA and math teachers, because it is a stressful time. And as a former ELA teacher, I just know the stress and the pressure you feel upon yourself as you're sitting there watching your kids take that test and just really feeling like, you've done your best, you've given them all you got, and you really want them to then reciprocate and do their best as kids. And also for our students, the assessment season can be challenging for them, but really proud of how they have worked through it and given their best each and every day. I also want to acknowledge our track coaches We have 5 different coaches that serve our kids each and every day out on the field and the track. Kyle Pope, Dalton Maples, Ben Carpenter, Taylor Woodward, and Jill Thimish Starling, taking care of our kids out in track each and every day. So, and the final recognition is Jamie Rice. Jamie Rice is new to our front office in the last couple of weeks. She has jumped in and done a tremendous job learning the role of being a registrar, being a front office administrative assistant, and just brings a lot of joy and energy to the building. It's been wonderful to have. Thank you.
Spring Hill High School, Mark Williams.
Good evening. As Dr. Burke mentioned, we had prom this last Saturday night and it went very well. We had 427 kids attend prom. We had the red carpet at the football stadium like we did last year. And then we hosted the Enchanted Forest under the big white tent in the back parking lot. The kids wanted to back underneath the tent. So it was a successful night. I need to recognize Carrie Rod and Alex Winkler for all their hard work putting together prom, but probably the most important person is Anna Klein. Getting ready for prom Saturday, I figured this is my 18th consecutive year of attending prom. And Anna is a paraprofessional for us, and she has been in charge of prom for many, many years. And Anna has decided to retire at the end of this year. So she's giving up gladly her prom chairperson. So I asked her how many years, and this was her 25th consecutive prom. And so Anna's just an amazing person, just a wonderful human being. We're blessed to have her on our staff and working with our students and organizing these proms for our kids. And I know Carrie and Alex, they keep on saying they're not going to do it, but they got some big shoes to fill starting from here on out. But it was a great night. And last but not least, I'd like to recognize our FCA club, Giselle McDonald, Wendell Smith, Jason Feedback, Paul Young. These individuals and these outstanding kids put together a bake sale for Ukraine, and they raised over $1,300 for this bake sale. And the FCA chapter in Kansas City was so impressed, they matched it from their own district funds for that. And it takes a lot of hard work to organize those goods and get them out and distributed. And our kids stepped up. And I won't say this too loud in front of JC, but when you give them a little something with a little bit of sugar in it, they're going to give them your dollar and get that on that. But they did a fantastic job. So thank you.
I see Stephanie Barnhill from the Early Learning Academies coming up.
Good evening. Tuesday, April 5th, the Spring Hill Early Learning Academy held its first Community Day. Our young scholars learn about community helpers throughout the year, and during Community Day, they had an opportunity to interact with some of those helpers. As the students went about the day, they learned about fire safety and the equipment that the firefighters use to keep them safe. They also had the opportunity to get up and crawl inside the truck. They thought that was really cool. Officer Ramos, Officer Pechnick, and therapy dog Officer Gus, along with his friend Officer Weiss, taught the students how to be safe around strangers, and all of them are now junior deputies. Carrie Hamilton brought the mobile dairy classroom, which gave students an opportunity to meet Miss Daisy Mae Blossom, the dairy cow, and see where their milk comes from. Everyone was delighted to pet the baby goats and join them on the playground, thanks to Miss Laura Hines and her family. I'd like to thank all the people who made this day possible for our young students, the community helpers who did the presentations, the entire Sheila staff who made sure that every student was safe, had the opportunity to interact with our guests, both the animals and the humans, and our wonderful parent volunteers who provided a helpful hand and extra sets of eyes as the students roamed around our early childhood campgrounds. One student, I think, summed it up best. Their little eyes got really, really big, and they got a really big smile on their face. And they said, "It's a magical day." Thank you.
Phil Elliott, Director of Technology.
So I have to jump back to Mr. Williams' recognition. Anna worked with me doing prom years ago, and I know it's hard for you to believe that I was the prom sponsor, but I was. So, and so she's, yeah, exactly. She did a great job then and always has. So today I want to take just a quick second. We had one of those weeks last week in the technology department that if we would have just had one day without something, it would have been a great week. But every day last week, we had some little challenge. We had a security scare, which fortunately everything did what it was supposed to do and prevented that. We had a couple of manufactured bugs that created problems across our system. And then the most fun was we had a rodent get into a handhole along our fiber optic path and chew the coating and a few of the fiber optic cables in the middle of the night. And but all of that we got through with grace because, and they all happened to land in Nick Stiles' lap. So everything that happened last week happened to be in his wheelhouse. But because of his detail, his knowledge, and his documentation, while they were still stressful situations, we were able to move through and beyond them with grace. And so I just want to take a second and appreciate and recognize what he does and all the little things he does along the way that makes us get through those. And then I know we don't normally recognize vendors, but I do think it's important when we have somebody who's been a partner for a long time. Lantel Communication, once we figured out Thursday morning that it was a fiber optic break, one phone call and they were there. There was, they came and diagnosed the problem. They came back at 3:30 to resolve the problem. They stayed until 8:30, 9 o'clock that night to make sure everything was good to go. They had somebody available the next morning if something came up that we didn't deal with that night. And obviously it's what they do. But after 15 years, just being able to make one phone call and not stress about who do you call and who do you get and that kind of thing. So thank you.
Any other directors? I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Updike.
Thank you. I just had one comment. We talked about, words are very powerful. The language you use is very powerful. And as I was sitting here listening to these recognitions, it's very clear why we have such an amazing district. When administrators, directors get up and they use words like brings joy and energy and move with grace and amazing and tremendous and phenomenal, it's really a reflection of how you most likely speak to everyone that works for you and why we do have the district that we do have. It comes from the language that you use as you talk to people. So I thank you all for that. It's really important that that culture is in place. So thank you. Moving on to our next item on the agenda is public participation. I do have one card. Michael Round. I would remind you that the board does, according to Kansas law, the board doesn't hear personnel complaints concerning employees or employee groups of the school district. That all happens in executive session and is reported through the administration executive session. We do set a time limit of 5 minutes for any public participant presentation. So with that, I turn it over to you, Mr.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Mike Round, and I'm from Overland Park in Olathe School District. And rather than, I applaud all of the recognitions and to congratulate, I came down from Overland Park, honestly, to recognize you all. For this reason, when COVID hit in March of 2020, I didn't know anything about it, like most. Since then, I've become, honestly, the best armchair epidemiologist, statistician I know. And I've spoken at the Board of County Commissioners meeting all the time. And rather than applaud the policy that you implemented, I applaud the method by which you arrived at the policy. And there's just one incident that, out of many, that sticks in my mind that I'd just like to briefly talk about. This last September, there was a cheer clinic here. And there were apparently 3 students out of the whole area. Out of 455 students that were there, 3 tested positive. Now, who knows where they caught it, if they caught it. The Johnson County Health Department is alerted. What should we do? Now, what choice do they have? We have to assume everybody was exposed. That's what they said. All 455 students exposed. We know what this means. 10 days, 14 days, isolation, quarantine, you're out for a long period of time. This was an excellent opportunity for an experiment because to them, they should have expected your cases to skyrocket. You have exposure. Here's our cases here. We expect cases to skyrocket if their policy is correct. Instead, at that time, your cases plummeted. Now, to me, that was an excellent opportunity for them to say, there must be something wrong with our policy when we say exposure means 10 days out or 14 days out. But they didn't. They didn't change anything. Whereas you all said, there must be something missing. It must not spread the way they think. Let's implement a policy that makes sense. Not a policy for the sake of a policy, but a policy that makes sense using a scientific method and looking at this. After this happened, for some reason came under attack by the Star. They article after article with this plummeting data on hand, they ignored it. You say, why is this? Honestly, I would expect people to say, go find out what Spring Hill's doing that we're not, because they must be doing something. Let's find out. That's what I said at the Johnson County Board of County Commissioners. Last September, I nominated you for the National Preparedness Award. No such word existed, but you deserved it. In December, so you say we can't predict the future. Olathe drops their mask mandate, which wonderful. But they don't have a rational policy in place for what happens if someone tests positive. Because now you've got, by definition, all these exposures. Everybody's out. I can predict what will happen. Thousands of kids will suddenly be told to isolate or quarantine. I mean, that is what happened. This is easily predictable. Nonetheless, it did happen, which means they gave it no thought. So at that meeting, I started yelling, contact Spring Hill. So honestly, I came down to just say thanks for implementing a rational policy that made sense.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you coming in. Very good. Moving on to consent agenda. Consent agenda consists of approval of the consent agenda items, approval of the minutes, the clerk's report, the treasurer's report, payroll and claims, personnel, and IDEA assurances. Any questions or discussion about the consent agenda?
Looks like we're hiring a lot of teachers. So how are we in that process? Still have a lot to go, or? Not to be a
Well,
big
first of all,
discussion, I don't-
as she's running up here, I think we're doing a tremendous job. One thing that I can tell you about Michelle is we pushed our teachers, or I'm sorry, we pushed our administrators a little harder to help us make decisions a little earlier. And so she had a really good outline of what we needed going into career fair time period, which is a really stressful time because your career fairs seem to within about a 3-week period every other day, if not every day. So Michelle's done an incredible job with that. Also, the superintendent this year was a little bit of a Santa Claus, and poor Doug back there. I don't know if he has any hair left because every time I would come in and say, so are you sure we can't just have one more? Are you sure we can't have one more? And so give credit to Doug for finding the money. But I can tell you, I think we're down to one in our back pocket. So when people talk about growth and all that, you still have to hire teachers to meet that growth. Not only that, then you have teachers who retire. You have teachers who decide to stay home with children. You have teachers who, because of their spouses, move. And all that seems to kind of hit all at the same time. So I'll turn it over to Michelle.
We have 3 or 4 at this moment of certified to fill. I'm expecting 2 resignations in the morning. So I'm never going to say we're finished because I did that last year and that wasn't a good idea. And we're working hard on classified, but the hiring is truly a team effort with the principals, their interview teams, the directors, and we just all work really quickly and get the great talent. And it's the buildings that win the candidate over and make them fall in love with the team and want to be here in Spring Hill. And I'm just Santa Claus and offer the job. So
Oh, very good. Great job. Mr. President, I move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second the motion. It's moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Any final comments or questions? Katie, please collect the vote.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
and Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Approved.
Very good. Moving on to our next agenda item, which is an action item for public participation procedural changes. These are procedural changes that we discussed at our last meeting. Dr. Burke.
Yeah, and I'll ask Doug, or I'm sorry, Phil, to open that up. I know that one of the things the board members asked is to see the full procedures. So we've had those up for most of the week. The changes that we're asking for are in red. Basically, what we're asking for is the board will hear comments from the following individuals: current students, current parents, current employees, patrons in the district, business owners in the district, and elected officials who directly represent the district. I know that there was a question on an official that directly represented. Well, to me, an official that can make a decision that affects our district directly represents us. So whether they're most of your House reps and your senators from the state, they're going to vote that can affect you directly. But I don't think the mayor of West Can, Kansas coming in to speak to you is the same as an elected official that can directly affect you. So with that, I understand we had a gentleman that came in and spoke tonight, and that's, just remember, there's a two-edged sword, because somebody can come in and compliment you and pat you on the back. It can just as easily come in and criticize you and be very rough on you as well. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Is there a method that somebody could petition to speak even that, no, they don't meet this list?
I think there's two things. If it's somebody that you want to be here for a presentation, we would just ask them to speak. I think if they contacted you directly or me directly, then I think you would go to your board president and to see how they fit into this. I think the lot is the context of what they want to speak to you about and why. I mean, there's a gentleman that has been speaking at a lot of meetings in the county, and that some districts will let him speak and some districts won't. And he's probably not been the most positive for public education person coming in to speak. So on someone like that, you may look at it and make a decision, no, that's not. On a situation like this, if this person was coming in and somebody wanted to petition and ask that person to be able to speak, then we would turn it over to the board president.
So that puts anyone outside of these, so prior students that aren't currently in there, but don't live in town, but still have connections to the district or whatever. It puts that decision in just one person's hands.
Unless you want to have a committee to do that, I'm okay with that. But again, what is the difference between a former student and somebody that doesn't live in the district? Because again, you're representing people in our district right now, and you're opening it right now. You're opening up to a lot of people that are outside the district, and I'm just going to remind you, what is good can also be just as bad. And I can tell you, in social media in the last couple of years, you've had a lot of former students that were very critical of the district, just as many as you've had some that were positive.
I struggle taking away people's choice to speak to us all together, face to face, by the fear that they would criticize us, which is definitely something they could do. But I also haven't seen it as be a problem yet through quite a few years. I mean, people have spoken to us, but I haven't seen too many people outside of our community come speak at one of our meetings. So I don't feel like it's a problem. Maybe it could become a problem, but I struggle putting this in place just to be preventative of criticism that we could face that we probably already do. I know that there are other options. People could send us emails or call us, but I do feel like face-to-face communication, remembering people are human,
that means something to me, and giving them the platform here to say what they like to all of us at the same time. I think that is an important piece of this.
Whose hands does that fall into to decide if someone really is a patron? I mean, you're gonna do a
That's
search of their address and what if
That's
they?
pretty easy.
Maybe.
No, it's pretty easy.
So wait.
If they live
wait.
in our district, we can check to see if they live in our.
I mean, you've got a former student that still
Doesn't no
has a
longer
home
lives in the
address here.
district, is not tied financially, not tied. This is where I struggle, is that we represent people that elected us that are within the district boundaries, right? That's our job. We have been very, very open and transparent with those within our district of people that we represent. I think what this does, it gives folks that live here, work here, pay taxes here, contribute to the district's success, are given preferential access to the board over those that do not meet those needs, that are outside the district. That I don't know as if it's a criticism thing. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think over the last couple of years, we've had both sides of it pretty evenly, and I think we've been fair and honest and open about how we allowed people to come talk. I think it's just putting boundaries around and preference towards folks that live within our district and have they're bought into the success of the district.
I know that board members have made complaints about how late some of the meetings have gone and that you're making decisions late at night. And there were some times when you had a group of people that were up there speaking to you, and some of those people didn't live in our district. And so that pushed everything back later. And then you yourselves complained about making decisions late at night. So this is your meeting. You decide if you want to open it up or not. I mean, I just used criticism and that became the whole thing, the focal point. I think you have to look at the bigger picture. You're opening yourself up that very soon there's going to be people that are running for election. And what a great venue that it's opened it up to the whole community to hear person after person after person come up here and speak to the board about an election, whether you or all of your people can vote on that. Because you think about it, you can have somebody running for the mayor of Olathe get up there and speak. Very few of you can vote on the mayor of Olathe, but you're still giving them a venue to come up here and speak to the whole district.
Going back to my question about the kids, the former students. So you've got a former student that gives their parents' home address. I don't see where that makes a difference.
If you want to add former students, we can add or take away anything you want. This was
I'm
a
not saying
discussion.
to add that.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is this was a discussion item, and then we could have added whatever you want to that, or we can take away whatever you want to that as well.
I hear you saying we're opening ourselves up to things, but what I feel like this policy is doing is closing what can be said and closing who can say it. And maybe not what can be said, but who can say it. Yes, sorry, I apologize. And I would actually love to say that I think the mayor of Olathe could speak here because they do represent half of our district or part of our district. So, but I think there's just different, I don't feel like we've seen a problem. I don't know why we're trying to create solutions for problems we haven't seen yet. That's my thought.
I kind of liken this somewhat to how we came up with our procedure for if a board member wants to bring something to the board, we have a informal discussion about it, and then we decide through consensus if we want to discuss that as a board and vote on it. I think when people that
we don't have a responsibility to just give them an open mic or whatever you want to say, 5 minutes. I don't really look at the negative or positive or whatever. It makes our meetings longer and our job longer. That and it can also give an appearance that people feel a certain way when it might not be the people we're representing. So I would actually be in favor of kind of limiting. I think other meetings I've been to, city council, for example, people have to say where they're at, what their address is. And I don't even think they really let people talk if they're outside the city. Maybe it's like their property is adjacent and it's being affected by a decision they're making or something like that. So I think we still have that option that if there was somebody like, you know, Brent says, I really want this person to come talk to us because I think they have some good feedback, we could bring it up at that informal discussion and then we could put it on the agenda and have that person come talk. So it's just kind of a way to put a fence around it a little bit to, you know, I don't look at it as preventative, more as just being proactive, I guess. So kind of where I'm at on it.
I would like to see if we do pass this, I would like to see that there's a way to petition the board to come to if they're not in this group. Kind of going along with what you said with the discussion.
Okay. Other comments or discussion? This is an action item.
What policy would this go under? Or is it in?
It's not a policy, it's a procedure. And that's what you have there is the procedure in front of us.
This is something we could try. If we decide we don't like it, we can change it.
Can I ask one question about validation of whether they fit into one of these categories? When will that happen?
So tell me more about that question. You're asking to validate what?
Well, we're setting boundaries on who can speak. Current students, current parents. How will we validate they fall into one of those categories and when will we validate that?
As soon as we're notified of it, we can validate it. But see, we're one of the few districts that allow somebody to walk up 5 minutes before. So many other districts make you wait or make you turn it in days before. And so if they're a student right now or they're a parent, they're in our system, that's pretty easy to pull up. If they're a business owner, that's pretty easy to pull up. If they own property, that's pretty easy to pull up. But you know, I think one of the things we're never asked is your address or how you're affected into the district. We've never asked that. And so you could easily have somebody come up 5 minutes before and start speaking. I think if they get into the middle of their speech and share that they're not part of that criteria, then you'd have to stop and have them leave. Just as if you had somebody that was very aggressive, that was not following your procedure as other things that are listed as well. They started talking about personnel or they started talking about other things that are listed in there that they should.
So this is kind of on a good faith, like here's the policy we hand to them and say, do you fall in this criteria? We're not checking a few minutes before anything to make sure that they.
It's going to be hard to do that, but anybody that walks up there is based on good faith that they're going to follow the rules that we ask them to follow.
And I will say the public participation cards do require them to give their address and phone number.
Any other questions or discussion?
Mr. President, I move that we accept the recommended procedural changes to public participation as presented.
Second. I'll second the motion.
Oh, I thought you did.
You were saying.
It's moved and seconded to approve the proposed changes to public participation. Any final comment or discussion?
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
I'm going to vote no because I don't feel that now's the time to start appearing that we're stifling free speech.
Mrs. Milius,
No.
apologies. Mr. Hoffman,
No.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
the motion has failed.
All right, moving on to where are we in our bond construction discussion items, bond construction update? Dr. Burke?
Yeah, we'll turn it over to Tim Meek to give you an update.
All right, I'll let this update start. I'll tell you, first of all, there's been no changes to the financial part of the bond, so continuing on with that. We'll go on down to Forest Spring Middle School. Still everything's on schedule for that. As you look at some of the pictures of that, you'll see some of the metal colored roof and some of the black roof has turned into white roof. That is the finished roof product. The building is dried in as far as the roof goes. There's still some windows. The windows and stuff will follow the brick as it goes around. But the building is getting enclosed pretty rapidly. A couple of the rooftop units are now on there. They tried to fly them up there last week. Not a great week to be putting a crane in the air and start to do stuff. So after they had 3 up, they pulled off and are going to plan on it next. They had to schedule the crane back in, and next week they're going to try to set the rest of the rooftop units. So out of the abundance of caution, they decided to call it off, which is a great thing. Permanent power is on. Gas service has been dug in. It's not there, but the gas is to the building right now. The masons continue to go around it. We've started work around the athletic area, seeding and sodding. Early May, we'll see the track surface sometime in early May, hopefully come in and get the track surface down for it. So challenges and successes on that project. Delta, the roofing company, has done a great job of being flexible, moving where we needed them to be to get it done. We had the fire marshal come in and do his 50% inspection. He does a inspection at 50% and 100% so that he can see everything in the walls and stuff like that before we put sheetrock on the walls and all of that, and start putting ceiling tiles in and things like that. So he sees all of that, and he had no problems with anything we're doing. The windows in the media center, the upper kind of a translucent panels, fiberglass panels that we have in there, they're installed. The ones are here for the commons area, and they're about ready to be installed here in the next 2 weeks. Biggest challenge has still been our steel. They're not holding anything up, but we'd like to get them out of the way. So they're still just dragging their feet a little bit, but luckily so far they haven't affected anything. We just like them out of the way because we want to finish those areas so we can move on to some other stuff. We've got people working in other areas right now, but it would help. So safety report is still the same, hasn't changed. 1 recordable, no lost time accidents for 283 days. So some of the pictures there, again, you can see the white roof, the black roof. Those are changing daily as you go up there. That's the academic wing, and this one that I'm showing now on the right. So it is almost 100% on the white roof, which is the finished roof product. Still have the coping and all that to do around, but that won't come until we get all the brick and masonry around. You can see the brick on the end of the gyms and some of that. That's kind of showing you what the pattern of the brick is. Same brick color as basically we've been using in the other buildings. So brick. You can see the drywall going up, one thing that I will mention J.E. Dunn has done for us this time. I came to him here a while back and said, I want to look at having a company do it, or we'll come in ourselves and do it. And if you look at the picture on the left-hand side, and we actually do this just before the installation goes in. We want to have a company take a picture of every one of those with the blocking there and all of the stuff in there. And I said, and maybe I can have Christy, we want to get a pricing, and J.E. Dunn, project manager Mike, says, no, I'll do that. So he has been taking a picture of every room, every wall before we put drywall on it and before the insulation goes in. So we know exactly what's in there. If we, later on, if we have to hang something on the wall, we know there's blocking there. So it's something I think we should have been doing probably on other jobs all along, but I hadn't really thought about a company doing that until the company came and started talking to me about it. So we are doing that now, and we'll have that historical record for, 30 years down the road. Somebody can come in and say, hey, what's behind here? We'll have that picture for them. So you can see the clear story, the fiberglass panels in the media area. Other construction and maintenance. Any questions on Forest Spring?
Not any question, but Tim, I think part of what's going on is people drive by and see the building going up so fast that we're getting calls about the opening in August of 22.
Yeah.
So I just want to remind the public that is going to open in August of 23. Just because you can see the outside doesn't mean all the stuff on the inside's been finished yet.
Yeah, there won't be, we'll be starting some asphalt here probably in early June. Curbing and stuff like that should start at the end of May, early June as well. So we'll start in the teacher's parking lot, the east side, and start working our way around on that. So it's going to start looking more and more finished from the outside, but again, there's still a lot of work to be done on the inside. So
I have a question. Do you know if Dunn has built any other of those schools that plan since our first one? Is this?
This is the only other one that I know that they've built. I'm sure there's some that are very similar.
Okay.
Architects like to copy their work, and if you guys have gone to Baldwin to their elementary school over there, that you'll notice that it looks very similar to our Prairie Creek, and some of those, they copied that and made a few tweaks, but it overall looks the same. So I'm sure the DLR has recycled this. I'm sure we weren't 100% the first ones to build, again, I haven't seen any other plans that look just like it, but I'm sure, that they recycle a little bit of that for bases of stuff. So, yeah. Any other questions? All right. Other construction and maintenance project, solar panel project. From what I understand, the last piece has actually shipped, and I'm not sure, it may be in the warehouse. So now it's just a matter of the busiest time of the year with everything going on every weekend and everything else. Can we get that done before school's out? If not, we'll just have to wait till school's out, because we don't want to interrupt the kids from being able to do something here at the end of the school year. So we are pushing and looking for any date we can, but again, we've got to make sure that we can do it and not disrupt of what we need to do in the building. So they'll get that part installed, do most of the testing that they can do on the field and all that, other than the final connections and flipping the switch. So yep. Move back up here. Spring Hill Elementary School, some maintenance projects, and Kylie, if you want any more questions, Kylie would be glad to answer them too. Interior lighting upgrades, him and his crew are doing some lighting upgrades in the elementary school, changing out some fluorescent lighting to some dimmable LED lighting. We're installing in blinds in the large clear story there in the library, replacing carpet in some classrooms. And we're also coating the exterior block walls with a sealant to prevent some water infiltration. That is a single width. For those of you who've been around, you might have heard me say this years ago, but that is a single width, which means it's not like your typical construction where you've got concrete block, then you've got a waterproofing membrane, and then brick on the outside. This is one block, 12-inch block or whatever, concrete block that's going through. So if you ever set concrete in a concrete block in something, you'll see that it will absorb water and transmit through. We have sealed it with some siloxane, but it's has a short lifespan. I have to do it pretty regular. So we're hoping with this sealant, which is actually a paint type product, that it will last much longer than that. So next year. Spring Hill Middle School maintenance project. One of the big ones is flooring. Replace the existing floor and tile in the commons, cafeteria area, the main corridors. We're going to be putting some LVT and carpet in those corridors as well. The commons area, that it's hard to tell, that's LVT in there, which is luxury vinyl tile. It's a vinyl product instead of your VCT like we used to use. It's got a wear layer. You'll see it. It's no wax tile, for lack of a better word. It's not like the old no wax tile where it had, but this has a wear layer on it that's got a little bit of shine, and so should be a lot less maintenance for our guys. They won't have to strip and wax it every year and do those kind of things. It'll be a less, and plus there's really some neat tile out there right now, and these are 4 different concepts that they've brought up for us. We will be bringing you back that at your next board meeting for approval. So Kylie, cost on that, you want to come up and do you remember? I think you shared it with me earlier, but my memory. So about $150,000 for the commons and the hallways. That's all of the public areas. Then we're also going to look at some epoxy and some restrooms and stuff like that as well in that building. So again, we'll be bringing back the floor tile and all to you next meeting. The next project is the Spring Hill Middle School maintenance project for the track and field. You guys will remember that Kylie had brought that to you, and we talked about it last meeting, I believe, the last update. And we had the Caw Valley Engineering and the architects looking at this as well, just putting the front end documents on it. We've gotten some budget pricing back on it. And it fits into what Doug said he had available for the project. So Doug said we can afford it. It's still very expensive. And it's probably roughly $750,000 to $800,000. The asphalt that's there now, it is 25 years old roughly. It is compressed down to where it's less than 3 inches, right at 3 inches in depth. There's no way to come in and grind it and put another layer on top. That was our original hope that we could do that. But we also are going to be making quite a few cuts in it as well, because we're trying to redo some drainage there that hasn't worked right. Water's been running over the tract and stuff like that. So we're trying to keep the water from running from the bleachers across the track and from the hillside there across the track. We're also putting some additional drainage in on the inside of the track to the football field area as well. We're putting in some French drains all along that to help drain that better as well. So the other part is replacing a scoreboard. That'll be a separate deal. There's also the chairs that stadium chairs that were put in by our booster.
I think Mr. Anderson has a question.
Oh, yeah. Nels?
What part did you say was 3 inches thick?
The asphalt portion of it. Yeah, when they cored it, they found out it was only about 3 inches left. Originally, it was about I think if I remember right, again, it's been 25 years. I think it was only a 4-inch track to begin with. And so over the years, the compression and asphalt will go down and come out. It's just part of what asphalt does. It does spread a little bit and it compresses more and more as it ages. So we have, like I said, we have multiple cuts we're going to have to make in it. We're putting in a place to pull for the timer to pull a wire underneath the track so they don't have to try to put a clothesline pole above the track that in a windy event will fall down and cause problems and stuff. While we're doing it, we want to do the right things, make it the same as what the middle school tracks are everywhere else pretty much. So also another thing will be pricing, and won't happen right this summer, but before the next track season, we'll also be replacing the pole vault mat too. I think they got the leftover high school pole vault mat before we moved out here, and it was used pretty well before then. So it's time to replace it too. So it's part of that upgrade. And Kylie's got more information.
I went ahead and purchased the pole vault mat.
Oh, did you?
Yes,
Okay.
because prices are going up and I just wanted to get it coming, so.
All right. Didn't tell me that.
Did you guys make any accommodations? Is the middle school hosting their track meets there this year?
Yes, they
Yeah.
are. I did some temporary repairs we did in-house on this flaked
Those
up track
places that you
surface,
see,
so they could have their events there. So, yes.
they were repaired, but they're not. Yeah.
They're
enough so it's
usable, just not.
Enough so it's usable, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
We will be coming back on May 9th with the pricing for this. This goes out to bid on the 13th, which is Wednesday. It'll be on the street. We'll have a pre-bid meeting on the 19th. Bids will be due back on April 28th. And then, like I said, we'll bring it back to the board for your consideration on May 9th for approval. So, yeah. We looked at another option of trying to do a real light mill if they could, not bring a big heavy milling machine in or anything like that, just basically bring in a skid steer just to rough it up. The cost estimates we got, they are going to do a bid on some, just a small roughing of the surface and an overlay. But it actually looks like it's not that much more on their cost estimates to do that by the time we have to do all the patching of other places where we have to cut the track and some other things. So it's not that substantial a savings as what I would have thought maybe it would be. So we will have an option. So there will be one option for you to look at when we do the bid. So you can kind of weigh it, and we'll tell you exactly what the difference is. The engineers really think the best option is to completely get rid of the asphalt and everything there. And we'll actually be taking out some dirt, coming back in with some AB3 underneath the asphalt and putting in a full lift of asphalt underneath the track. If you think about this, and this one's lasted 25 years with the condition it was, we would hope that this, with doing it the way we do asphalt now, would last at least that long, if not longer, for sure. So this one, I can tell you, I do remember was put on dirt. It was chemically treated. So, it had, I think it was fly ash in it. So it had a little bit of something to set it up, but it was still just dirt. It wasn't any compacted gravel or anything like that, or AB3 like we do nowadays. So
What's the typical lifespan of a track? Do you have an estimation?
10 to 12 years.
That's what I talked to a couple vendors out, and
It's about the same. It's really about the same as your turf football fields. They claim that when you're replacing turf football fields, you ought to be thinking about your track too, because that's roughly the lifespan of typical turf. Again, that's an estimate. Really, you have to look at measuring it and seeing how your drop tests are and all of that on your fields to see if they've gotten too compacted, and there's ways to deal with compaction too, by pulling all of the infill material out and laying it back in, and some of that if it's just compaction. But if you're wearing out and losing a lot of fiber, then you'll be replacing your field. So they say it's a good time to do them both at the same time, because if you're tearing something up and traveling across the track, it's good to have it out of the way so you're not tearing it up when you're putting in a turf field. So.
any other questions for Tim?
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is curricular adoption discussion. Dr. Burke.
Yeah, we're going to turn this over to Dr. Aaron Smith.
Good evening, and I'm going to invite our team of educators who served as leads on this project up to introduce themselves.
I'm always first. I'm Tracy Garnett, and I'm one of the classroom teachers at the Early Learning Academy.
I'm Allie Daniels, and I'm one of the classroom teachers also at the Early Learning Academy.
I'm Kim Poffenbarger, and I'm one of the special education teachers at the Early Learning Academy.
So the team would like to make a recommendation tonight around a social emotional learning instructional resource. And this curricular adoption process is in alignment with our strategic plan under personal development. So we're looking to build those social emotional learning skills, even of our youngest learners. Our recommendation to the board is a product called Second Step. It's published by the Committee for Children, which was established in 1979. So this is a publisher that's been around for a while. It's widely known and recognized, so very familiar to us. And just to talk you through tonight the process, I wanted to share our timeline for the adoption. We started this process in the fall semester. So this team actually assembled together early in August and September to do some of the initial work. And part of the reason I wanted to share the timeline up front is that normally we would bring adoptions to you in February and ask you to take action on them during the winter. But we've added a new component to our adoption process, which is a pilot phase. So we'll talk a little bit more about that this evening, but that does add a little bit of time to our process. However, it makes our process more thorough. So started in early August and September, and now here we are tonight to make a recommendation to you. And we'll kind of dig into what that process has looked like. So this is a 5-step process that really starts with assembling our team and going into some pre-screening of different materials. Then on to the pilot phase, an evaluation phase, to where we'll submit a proposal to you tonight and then discuss a plan for implementation if this particular product is approved for the board. We had not only our team behind me involved in this adoption process, but we also had Stephanie Barnhill as the administrator of the Early Learning Academy participating. And because the Early Learning Academy is a small group of teachers, we were actually able to involve all teachers in the pilot phase. So every teacher who works in the Early Learning Academy had an opportunity to be a voice at the table in this process. So starting with that first step in the process, that pre-screening phase for the team, we looked at a number of different products, researched those products, reviewed them, and then we narrowed the scope to 5 different vendors that we wanted to meet with for product overviews and demonstrations to ask initial questions. The team also worked to establish evaluation criteria for how we were going to look at those products. And that's included in board docs. So you can pull that up and see what evaluation criteria was considered, and then what are those key look for. So when we say that we want to see something that's evidence-based, what does that really mean? If we want to see something that covers all domains of learning, what are the key things that we're looking for? So I want to really give credit and recognition to this team. They did a lot of that initial work in those early stages for researching, reviewing products, meeting with vendors alongside myself and Ms. Barnhill. A lot of time, a lot of energy spent in going through that process and establishing the evaluation criteria. And one thing I want to note too, just for your purposes, the evaluation criteria that we used, these are criteria established by KSDE and the National Center for Quality Teaching and Learning for preschool curricula. So our evaluation criteria is informed by both our state and some national organizations. Through that pre-screening process, we narrowed the scope of products down to our top 2 choices. And so normally in the process, that pre-screening phase would have actually resulted in a recommendation to the board of the top product, but we've initiated that pilot component. So
In the pre-screen, we had 2 products that came out as top choices. Second Step, which is the product we're recommending for purchase, and then Bouncy, which is a product from Ripple Effects. So we were piloting and comparing those 2 different resources. The pilot took place, we started that in January, and most pilots on average are going to last about 5 to 7 weeks. So the team of teachers had an opportunity to get some professional development, make some plans for how they wanted to trial these products. And I think they would tell you that the pilot phase has been really important in our process. We always get great sales pitches from vendors, but when you can try before you buy, you really get a chance to see whether or not the sales pitch is truly just a great pitch, or if in reality, it's a good product for our students. So we had a really good experience piloting these top 2 resources, and throughout the pilots, we were able to stay in contact with our vendors, ask questions, really dig deeply into the resources to see if these would be a good fit for our early learners. And these are included in your board docs, but these are just some of the criteria that we looked at. And you can also find in board docs the data from the pilot. So when you take a look into those materials, you can see the top 2 products, Second Step and Bouncy, compared side by side. And you'll find in almost every single category that Second Step was ranked highly by teachers and outranked Bouncy as its closest competitor. We are also able to gather some anecdotal feedback from some families around the home to school connection component. So we were able to get their take on materials that can be sent home and shared with their children. What were their thoughts? We got a little anecdotal feedback from our families around that. And then we also gathered some feedback from our teachers. And I'd like to invite our teachers up tonight just to share with you their impressions from the pilot and why they feel like this is the best product to recommend to you.
As a classroom teacher, Second Step was highly engaging for all my students. The lessons explicitly taught specific skills such as whole body listening, welcoming and inviting others to play, self-talk, and focusing attention, to name a few. Students need these skills to be successful in school, at home, in their communities, in their careers, and in life in general. The students enjoyed interacting and role-playing with puppets, whom they named Berry and Flower, and music also helped to facilitate their learning. I have a student who struggles to initiate play with peers. Many times before Second Step, he would isolate himself and play alone until a teacher would help facilitate play between him and a peer. After a few lessons on how to welcome and invite friends to play, the student began to spontaneously greet peers as they entered the classroom and would invite them to play. The explicit instruction on what to say and the role playing with the puppets gave him the confidence to independently use the skills that he had been taught during the Second Step lessons, and he continues to use this skill daily. Self-talk is another skill that we explicitly taught during our pilot of the Second Step curriculum. Self-talk is essentially talking to yourself to help you focus on the task in front of you. While getting ready to go outside for recess, I had a student use self-talk to stay on task while zipping his coat. In preschool, learning to zip your coat is very challenging and very frustrating sometimes. And this little boy was struggling to zip up his coat, but he was able to stick with it using self-talk and was able to zip his coat for the first time. And he just kept whispering to himself, zip my coat, zip my coat, zip my coat, over and over again until he was able to be successful. Another lesson that my students found engaging and helped to improve whole group instruction is being able to focus attention on one thing and ignore the distractions around them. We taught the students to use their attentionoscopes, so they're basically like binoculars, to focus on one thing or one person while ignoring everything else around them. Before reading a story or during calendar, I would have the students focus their attention using their attentionoscopes. And once they were focused, they could put their hands down. And during whole group and small group activities, some of my students still use this strategy when they are distracted. So they'll put on their attentionoscopes, focus for a few minutes, or not a few minutes, it's more like a few seconds. And then they'll put their hands down, but they're able to pay attention and focus for longer.
So when implementing Second Step in my classroom, one of the first things I noticed was just how quickly engaged my students became in the lessons. They named the puppets MJ and Emily, and they would often ask me to get MJ and Emily up from their nap because that's what I told them they were doing while they were in my desk drawer. And also the curriculum was super easy to implement. So as a teacher, you know, we're constantly busy thinking of answers to different questions. In my room, it's Miss Allie, Miss Allie, Miss Allie, Miss Allie. 80,000 times a day. So having a curriculum that was easy to implement in my classroom was extremely helpful. And it was something that my paras were even able to implement when I was gone one day. My students also really loved the songs. So in preschool, songs are really important for learning, and it's something that they can quickly grasp onto. And even though we stopped piloting Second Step, back in February, my kids are still singing the songs. One of my students even go, Miss Allie, I think we should probably sing the listening song. We're not quite ready. And I was like, you are absolutely right. We should sing the listening song. So it was just a really easy curriculum to implement. And my students also improved in their back and forth communication, which is a skill that's very difficult even for adults to be able to have a back and forth conversation. So my students being able to have that back and forth conversation with a puppet who they knew would listen to them and be able to respond back, improved them in their communication during snack time. I had students not only talking to me, which is normally their favorite thing to do, but they were actually talking with their peers, which is what I really enjoyed, seeing 3- and 4-year-olds being able to have an entire conversation about what you had for lunch or what you did before school or what you were going to do when you got home. Seeing them being able to communicate back and forth was one of the skills that I found extremely important and one that happened very, very quickly in Second Step in only the 4-week pilot. So
these two really presented most of what we loved about this program, but just to give you a couple other perspectives. As a special education teacher, I really liked that it can be involved in every aspect of their day. So we can reference the listening rules and the listening song when we're going and transitioning down the hall to a different activity. We can bring it into my classroom pretty easily, use it as a small group. I've stepped in and I've co-taught with it, which has been really good. And then as a parent too, I have a child who's in a classroom there as well. And he comes home and was singing the listening song about 50 million times in the car one day. So it's good that they are picking it up and it's very easy for us to reference it back. And so when we're needing to correct some of those behaviors, it can happen very quickly and seamlessly, which is really important when we're in preschool. So just a couple other perspectives there.
And just to give you an idea of what this particular program covers, I'll ask Katie if she'll hand these out. These are just quick handouts. The first page gives you an idea, just at a glance, what the units of study are for the Second Step program. And then the next couple of pages go more into the units to detail the weekly concepts and the learning objectives for the students. So the teachers mentioned several of the things, listening obviously being one that was a big hit among our early learners, but there are a lot of great objectives for students, including things like making friends and including friends in activities, making sure that not only are you a good listener, but you're also an active participant in conversation. How do you handle big emotions as a little person? So when you feel sad or frustrated, what are some ways that you can cope with those emotions? So that just gives you kind of an idea of what the lessons will target when the teachers implement those in the classrooms. So we are recommending the Second Step program as a purchase for social emotional learning at the Early Learning Academy. We're recommending that we purchase 7 classroom kits, and with that comes free digital access as well as free professional development for our teachers. They were able to do a little bit of professional learning with the product during the pilot phase, but they'll be able to extend that if the board chooses to approve this product. And we'll bring this back at our next board meeting as an action item. So if approved, we'll then get into that last phase of the process where we work on implementation with ordering materials, a plan for distribution, and Ms. Barnhill and I will begin discussing a plan for the teachers' professional learning and providing them some time as a professional learning community to do some collaboration and unit planning and preparation. So at this time, we'd love to take any questions that you may have.
I don't want to get into the weeds too much on this, but I did notice on the, where you're comparing the two, that the professional development was the one thing that seemed to rank higher in the other one. So do you feel like you're going to have to come up with a lot of things that they're not providing? Or, I mean, I'm sure you're pretty good at coming up with things anyway.
We can't come up with things every now and then, but we actually won't have to. I can't speak entirely for the team as to why they might have selected Bouncy as a higher rating. I'll definitely turn that over to them. But one thing that is different about the two products, Second Step provides more of a train the trainer model. So they would work with myself and Ms. Barnhill to become trainers of the product, and then we would actually deliver that professional learning to the staff, which is a little bit different. A lot of times professional learning is a component that you would pay for, and then you would be working with the program consultant to deliver that training. But I'll turn that question over to the team if they have any comments regarding the PD.
So Second Step was outlined a lot more clearly on what expectations are of the teacher and how we should be presenting the materials, so that the professional development would just be guiding us in that. Bouncy was a lot more loose in how you were supposed to implement it, and there was a lot more up in the air. So you would need a lot more professional development when you were going to do that one, because it's a lot more for you to decide, whereas Second Step outlines it out really clearly.
That makes sense.
So maybe that's professional learning needed.
Yep.
rather than-
Yep.
I would say too, the nice thing about the professional learning that they have outlined, we can access at any time. So anytime we have a new early learning teacher onboarding, we're able to access that again at no cost. So we don't have to go back to the company and sign them up or register them for training. That's something we can always provide.
That's good.
Some of the comments were from parents that got to take home activities and things like that. Is that a nightly thing? Is that a weekly thing? Like what is, how does that look for the parents?
Yeah, so at the beginning of each theme or each unit, you send home the activity guide. And so it's a letter that tells the parents what the topic is and what the skill is that we'll be working on for the next 5 days. And then it gives activities that go along with with what we're doing in the classroom. So if it's, the attention to scope or the listening song or whatever, it will provide that information to the parent. So it's about once a week.
Or it sounds like in the case of the listening song, more often than that.
I guess I had a question. Did you have any parents involved in the selection somehow, or was there anybody on the committee or?
We didn't include parents as part of the selection of the resources, but when we did get to that pilot component, we asked families to try any home connection pieces. We identified some families that we thought we could get some feedback from and just get a sense of whether or not those activities were things they could do, that if they resonated with their student. But we did not include parents as far as giving feedback on the specific evaluation rubric.
How long do we usually keep a curriculum?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, because generally curriculum is reviewed every 7 years on average. And so you would make a determination at that time if it's something that you need to launch a new adoption cycle for, if there's been product updates, if there have been changes to the standards that we're trying to achieve. So for instance, this product is aligned to the Kansas Early Learning Standards. So if there was a change in standards that might prompt us to move forward with a different product, that might be a reason. But on average, you want to review a curricular resource every 7 years to note if there's any need to go a different direction.
And this cost we would pay. I have a lot of questions, I'm sorry. This cost we would pay just the one time.
Correct.
And then until we change or whatever.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Appreciate the laying out the exact process and the level of rigor in the process that obviously went through it. And the piloting. I mean, is piloting, I think you mentioned, that's not really a typical thing.
It's not something we've done in the past as a district, but it is a pretty common practice in curriculum and instruction to include a pilot, mostly for what I shared earlier. When you hear vendor product overviews and demonstrations, even researching the materials, just when you have those samples in hand, is not quite the same experience as actually implementing them in the classroom and trialing a lesson or two with students. So the best feedback we can get on a product is to see how our students engage and react to it. And I think that many of our teachers would tell you until they've piloted something, they may have gone in one direction and made a recommendation based on what really ends up to be just some basic bells and whistles, and didn't really do much for their kids when they actually piloted. So it's a pretty common process to pilot materials when you do an adoption. It's just not a process we've done previously. And so I know with the iReady adoption last year, Mr. Wilson had said we would bring products to the board in February for consideration, but with the addition of the pilot, that's why we're bringing it to you later in the spring.
Any other questions? Very good. Thank you. Appreciate it. Great presentation. Moving on to spring, summer technology purchases and renewals, Dr. Burke.
Yeah, we'll turn this over to Phil Elliott.
So what I put together here is just kind of a list of items that will be coming back to you in future meetings. I'll be happy to talk about as many or as few of these as you would like. So I will kind of go by section, and if there's something you have in that section, stop me and we'll talk in detail about it. The software and support renewals, these are items that are over $20,000 per our board policy that we discussed earlier this year. That are annual expenses. Some of these we may be looking at doing some multi-year to try to gain some value. But typically the ones that are here hasn't been enough for us to lock ourselves in for a long term if we wanted to make a change. Any questions on software and support renewals and what those are for? We can always come back if you think of something later. Content filter, I want to spend just a quick second introducing this. We've been using the iBoss content filter for about 6 years now. It's one of those necessary evils. It's not necessarily something we want, but it is something we need. And in that particular industry, there's a lot of leapfrogging that happens. One vendor comes up with a new solution and a better way of doing it, and then a few years later, somebody else catches that and does something different. iBoss has been a pretty good and reliable source. They're kind of in a pickle right now with transitioning from an on-premise device to doing everything 100% in the cloud. And they've got a hybrid solution that just isn't reliable for us to make changes to. It's reliable to function, and the job it does is still good. But anytime we make a change, it's a several step process to verify that change actually went through. That was one of the challenges that we had last week with a vendor bug. So we've been looking around and demoing quite a few different pieces of equipment. We will be bringing a recommendation to go with Content Keeper to the board. I've listed a few things there that are some highlights. The third bullet I want to mention briefly, most of the devices and most of the companies are going to the cloud only. It reduces their support cost tremendously. Obviously, if they don't have to worry about how we have something configured here, they're managing it in the cloud. The problem with a filter being only in the cloud, you're relying on their software and their scripting to direct all of your traffic from your local devices to the internet. And our little creative geniuses that we have find lots of ways around that. And so when we have the device sitting in between where they sit and the internet, it's a lot harder to make those changes. It still happens, but it's way harder than if it's all in the cloud. So we want to keep an on-premise piece of equipment. And so that's one of the big bullets up there. Their SSL decryption is literally what they're known for. 20,000 foot overview of that. In order for us to see what a student is typing into a search box or what they're entering into a specific web page, we have to basically do a hack and set in the middle and watch them type that search term. And so to do that, we have to unpackage the website they're going to, repackage it up with our own certificate, let them make the entry, and then read it before it goes back, right? So we have to be a man in the middle, and that's what a man in the middle attack is. And that's literally what our filter does. But they're known for that in the industry. And that's one of the things that we were looking for. Because almost every website that has any data entry at all is an encrypted website now. We have to be able to see that. And obviously we don't encrypt everything, but we try to encrypt the Google searches, the YouTube searches, those kinds of things that we know we need to. And if we've got a problem in a particular site, we can do that one as well. And then I just wanted to share some pricing estimates. This is a game for the salespeople, is to see how much profit they can make on one particular deal. So we've had some back and forth. I'm 99% sure we're going to be around the $55,000 mark for this one. iBoss knew we were looking and they didn't want to lose a customer. That's better pricing than I got 3 years ago when we renewed last time. So they're trying hard to keep us. It's just not worth it. There's too many things they're not doing well, and I don't see any end in sight. They've gotten too big and their support hasn't kept up. And so that's part of the reason we're making that recommendation. Any questions on the content filter? We will be discussing with the district administrators some potential changes in some of our filter categorizations because they do things just slightly different, as well as looking at maybe some tiers to the restricted profiles. Sometimes we need to keep some students a little more on task than others. So we'll be looking at those as well. iPad rotation. This is just part of our renewal process. These are 430 devices that were up for renewal. This is basically when we went to the iPad one-to-one in the kindergarten and first grade classroom where they have a device available for the student in a cart in the machine in the classroom. We did add 70 devices just to deal with growth. That'll cover both staff and students. With that, we need 190 cases. Some of the ones we're replacing are version model 6 and some are model 7. The model 7 cases will work, the model 6s won't. So we'll be able to get some of those cases. The quote is there. Apple only allows education customers to buy direct from them. So there is no way to get a competitive bid on their products. Any questions on the iPads?
Yeah, you said one-to-one on iPads. I didn't think we had gone one-to-one.
They're just available in the classroom so that they don't have to reserve them. They're still doing lots of other activities that aren't that way. So these are just available so that every student has one and the teacher doesn't have to schedule around another classroom.
They're not taking them home.
No, they stay in the classroom. They're just available.
Usage. Okay, thanks.
And when that came out of my mouth, I knew that question was coming. Phone server hardware. We have some 5- and 6-year-old voice servers. So gone are the days of physical old phone systems. And so these are virtual server hosts. 6-year-old servers, we have 13 virtual voice servers running on them, about $30,000 to replace those. And then we have 2 voice gateways. Basically, those are the routers that do the processing of the phone calls between CenturyLink and our phone servers. I did put a note on there. I'm not so concerned about the servers. Those are a little bit more readily available. Some of the specialty equipment like those gateway routers and some of the items I'm going to talk about after this, we're getting estimated delivery timeframes of anywhere from 8 weeks to 60 weeks. So as we're going through this process, which is part of the reason I don't have actual quotes for you, we're looking at other options to see what kind of if we make a small model change, does that change it from 60 weeks to 8 weeks and those kinds of things. So that's just part of the times we're living in. The virtual server hardware, similar. We have some 6 and 7-year-old virtual servers. Again, ETA on those is better than some of those specialty things, but it could end up coming out of next fiscal year. We'll work with the vendor and make sure if we do get approval, we'll cut the PO out of next fiscal year and go ahead and it will be held so that they can order it, but it won't be available for payment until after July 1st. So, and then antivirus security software. For a lot of years, we've been using the MacBook, and we just keep all of our students and staff as restricted users, which alleviates most, if not all of the older risks that occurred on our MacBooks. There's starting to be a little bit bigger trend because the MacBook had such a small market share. Very few malicious actors were using it as a target platform, so it hasn't been a big risk. They're starting to target specific industries. And so now they're starting to look at the Apple because they know it sits in a lot of education environment, and they're looking for opportunities to get, personal information is really what they're after. And so we're looking at making some changes there. This is one of those that the pricing's all over the place. Part of that is because the security industry is just exploding. But the other thing that's interesting here, to try to find something that works with the Mac that doesn't have a huge negative impact on the performance, those people know that they've got something, and so they're pricing it accordingly. We are looking at bundling it with our Jamf renewal, which is one of the items we talked about up above. They have a product. We have done one small pilot with it. We're going to do it a little bit larger to make sure that it does do what we want it to do. What's nice about that is it's completely integrated with our management system, so we can have a lot of automated processes that can kick off if a malicious code is detected. The last thing, I want to talk a little bit about budgeting and where these things come from. Some of these items are going to come out of LOB that are software related. Some of these are general fund purchases, and then most of the hardware would be capital outlay expense.
What is the JMF again?
Jamf,
Yeah.
That's our management system for all the Apple products. So the iPads and MacBooks, it's actually what allows us to push out software, locate the device when it's missing, make configuration changes, do remote desktop support with the users when they ask, that kind of thing.
Well, why are the servers life only 6 to 7 years? And then what do we do with them after we pull them out of service?
So we pull them out of service and wipe them, and then we end up purple waving them most of the time. They're just a 24/7, 365 device. That's a pretty standard industry. It used to only be 5 years, and it's gone out to 6 and 7 now.
They just start slowly failing one at a time?
No, it's just our expectation for things to be operational is greater than 99.9%. And so it's just a matter of trying to be proactive.
We get rid of them before they fail.
Correct. Any other questions? All right, I'll bring back to you these at future meetings, depending on when they're ready. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Moving on to fifth Monday in May, Dr. Burke.
Yeah, it was brought up that if the board remembers, you decided that on the fifth Mondays that you would have like a work retreat. And then as looking at the calendar on the fifth Monday in May, there was nothing set up for a retreat. Then we looked a little closer and we saw that it's on Memorial Day. So we are recommending that you do not have your work retreat on the fifth Monday in May. The next fifth Monday, I believe, is in August. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
It's a good catch. I would agree. We don't.
I think Katie's the one that caught it originally. So.
I think originally it was Candy because she created the schedule last year before I was clerk.
I won't be here. You're all welcome to go.
Any questions or pushback on not doing that on Memorial Day? All right. Next item on the agenda is board member reports from National School Board Association National Conference that we attended week before last.
Sorry to miss it.
Yeah, it was a good conference. It was in San Diego. I think everyone went out Thursday afternoon, spent Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at the conference. I think some folks, I think Nicole, you stayed Monday until it was over. But I just wanted to spend a few minutes. I guess it's Nicole and Brent and I are the three here. There were five board members that went. Allie, Celine, and Keith Ewing also went, but they aren't here this evening. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes to walk through what we saw and what ideas we could possibly bring back. Nicole, do you want to start?
Sure. Friday, I took a half-day course on redefining student success. And a couple big things that I took out of that were creating a portrait of a graduate, identifying what skills we would really like to see every graduate leave here with, kind of aligning that with maybe what universities or taking some of that, and then also real world skills, like what a lot of it was more problem solving skills, time management, critical thinking, those sort of things. So really defining what we hope our students leave here with. And so there's a book that I was given that can help kind of navigate us through that, along with some districts that have already created that went a step further and created the portrait of an educator to then take the items that we identified we want in our students, taking that and using that to develop this portrait of an educator, using that to help in recruiting and keeping great staff. One board went then the next step and did portrait of a school board member, which is a very interesting thing to do. So then something else that came out of that was quite a few of these districts do community listening sessions, which we don't do now, and but they host them quarterly.
What was that again?
Community listening sessions. So I have a conversation kind of planned in 2 weeks with a board member. Actually, I don't think she was a board member. I think she was like a director from a school in Washington. And their board hosts these community listening sessions. Each board member and a staff get together, have a topic. It's done through Zoom just because they felt that's the best way that they've been able to facilitate this. It's very interesting. She said a lot's come out of it. I thought it could be something to think about. I don't know. It just seemed a really great way to engage our community, a really open forum sort of thing. That was Friday. And then probably one of the other, if not, well, I think one of the other big things that I thought I went to on Saturday, a board self-evaluation breakout session. And I think Doug, you were in that one as well, right?
Yes.
It was really great. They created this tool. It was really, really great. And they actually used a book called Coherence to create that.
Use two books. Yeah, one is Core Principles of Governance, and then the Coherence. So it's the same author, but
yeah. So I thought that was after seeing a couple years of our board evaluation methods, I thought that could be a good way where we could grow and get better, and maybe use some of their guidance and strategies.
Yeah, and they give access to all of the materials that they had, so it gives you get to leverage their intellectual capital
Mhm.
to your own benefit. I mean, that's a good thing.
I mean, I could continue. I don't know how much you
I
guys.
just
want me
think a
to
high
say.
level ideas you think we need to,
There was, on Saturday, I did this, create a winning board, breakout
Winning
session.
board?
A winning board, how to
Uh-huh.
create a winning board. Oh, I'm sorry. It was create a winning board culture without losing to politics. And one of the things that was interesting that is kind of a new, there's a lot of questions surrounding it, was this board from Wisconsin had a board governance officer that really helped keep the board on track with really what their focus is, and like saying this is governance compared to maybe a little more in where they shouldn't be, along with helping them stay in line with policies and things like that. So I thought that was an interesting thing I'd never heard of. Yeah, I'm like, I feel like I went to quite a few. There was one on Monday called Creating Future Ready Schools. And they gave a lot of really great resources on different areas for, there was one for all4ed.org in ways to create, help create schools that culture, different ways to encourage our districts. So this man, his name was Thomas Murray, was an amazing speaker. And he, I thought would be wonderful, something like to do in an opening, we do something for our teachers, like an opening session where he was just so encouraging and inspiring. Like he had some great things to say. So anyways, I had a great time. I learned a lot, came back with lots of all these ideas that we could do, but hopefully with some thoughts from you guys, we can at least have goals to do one thing.
Yeah, and one of the comments they made about self-evaluation is pick, 3 things in a year to do so that you don't get spread too thin. So I thought one of the interesting things about that is they said that most board self-evaluations create more work for the superintendent rather than the board. And I don't think that's the intention of that. It's the intention is really about creating work for the board on how to improve. So and having those folks who were from Troy, Michigan. It's based on pretty solid research and solid approach, and really it boils down to what's going well and what could be better, and that's really the process that you work through.
And one of the things that I thought was really awesome is that you evaluate your board as a whole, and then you evaluate yourself, and you present that, and it's really helps people look at where they could be better. And I think I wrote it down. How am I contributing, or how am I distracting from board work? And so I thought that was really, really useful for all of us to do a little look inside and see how we could do better too.
Yeah. Brent?
I'll start with we talked a little bit about the general sessions. The first one was Damon Johns from Shark Tank. He was a phenomenal speaker. Oh my goodness, very inspiring. He started FUBU. I didn't really know what that was, but he went on to that and much other things. We also had a wonderful Kansas representation. We have John Heim as the executive director of NSBA, and he's from Manhattan, I believe. He's been all over the state.
Yeah.
And then the incoming president is Jim Henderson?
Frank.
Frank Henderson, yes, Frank Henderson from Topeka.
From
So
Kansas.
It was neat to have them come up there and talk about Kansas in front of 4,000 people. So, and then I believe the second general session was two, I call them young men. They must be old. They talked about Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, and it was really neat. They said, I don't know how many years ago, but one year Saks in New York said, we're going to let all these celebrities decorate the Christmas trees in the windows of Saks. So they get to this one. It's just a green little tree with some plastic over it. And it says underneath, I like you just the way you are. And it was his. So that was a neat story. So, but yeah, he was a man ahead of his time. I didn't know that. I never really watched the show. I thought he was kind of odd as a kid, but anyway, looking back at what he was doing, he was ahead of his time. It was pretty neat. My first session was Developing Teen Global Competence, which is a very big title. Wasn't what I thought, but it was very good. I got a lot of bullet points. If anybody's got questions, I'll try to see what I can remember. But one of the things they talked about, when the kids are going on field trips, they have these cameras they give the kids that upload to the parent's cell phone. So they go on a field trip, take all the pictures they want, and at night, when the kids get home at dinner or whatever, they can talk about how their day was and what they did. And the parents can look at these pictures and go, oh, why'd you take this picture? It was neat. I don't know where you get these cameras that do that, but they showed them. They're little, like the old little digital ones. I don't, anyway, they're out there. And then they talked about, I guess NASA has a genius test, and they decided for some reason to give it to all the kids instead of adults. And when they got the results, it said 98% of kids are creative geniuses. But by the time you're an adult, that number dropped to 2%. And they researched it and said it was a learned behavior. Because you've been told, well, you try something different, that didn't work. And after you try enough things, well, you kind of give up. But anyway, that was interesting. Oh, and then he was talking about the middle school students. They did a little study that said if a teacher greeted the middle school student as they walked into the door of the classroom, their proficiency went up like 20%. Like, that's really cool.
Just small things.
Yeah, just very simple. I would have never, how do you know these simple things would work that well? And then the next one was Developing Teen Global Competence. And they were talking about innovators and inventors. And they said currently innovators are 82% male and 18% female, which that really shocked me. I thought it'd be more closer than that. And they said it's trending upward, but I forget what he said, how many years it would be, but it was like 30, 40 years before they were equal. I don't know why, but that's what they were saying. And then he pulled up a slide, which I found it on the internet, and I'll pass this around, but it shows where the innovators are in every section of the US. And it's above 3.1 per thousand. And in Kansas, they're not where you think. They're not in the cities. They're in the rural areas. So
Survival.
yeah, I think it's because, yeah, that's it. I thought that was pretty neat. The actual guy doing this session, he was there to push his software, which he didn't even show it to us. I'm not even going to go there. It was disappointing. Then I went to a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging session. That was interesting. They had, one of the things they said was, have you ever been in a situation where you did not belong? And then how did you feel while you were there for the whole time? You couldn't, you weren't allowed to leave. And I've been there. It's interesting. And then what else did she talk about? They said to be included, you need to be seen, included, and to belong. And we talked about confirmation bias. It's in like the sources you believe, if that makes sense. And then decline bias, like saying back in my day, you're biased towards what happened, but that's better, you know. And then we talked about in-group bias. You favor one person in your group over another. And then implicit bias. And you associate biases from your memory. That was interesting. I didn't think about that for a minute. And then they had said that we will say something to you that's going to make you very uncomfortable. We will put something on the board that's very uncomfortable. I never had that feeling, but at the end of it, I had a little bit of a feeling of disappointment at the approach they brought it. It was, it's hard to describe, but it was almost condemning rather than uncomfortable because of the situation. It was like, this is kind of your fault. It wasn't what it went down a rabbit hole I didn't think it'd go, but anyway. Their final, the final topic was observe what's going on, assess what's happening, and then take responsibility for it, and then act upon it, and later follow up. So I thought that was pretty sharp. And then I went to a session called Culture of Innovation, and it was put on by the El Cajon Valley, California School District. And that super, he was some kind of rock star. He came up there and told us that, I didn't realize this, there's $1.8 trillion in student debt right now. And he's like, we need to decide whether we need to send everybody to college or make sure they have the options of not going, and technical trades, whatever you might be. They being a California school, they reopened 3 months after they closed for COVID. They got special permission and they opened up for the workers of essential, or the children of essential workers. They had 17,000 kids back in 3 months.
Wow.
It was neat. And they just used innovation to do it. And they I don't know what they do to create such a positive culture, but there's a waiting list to be a teacher in this district. Like, that's pretty crazy. And one of their quotes was, culture is based on the worst behavior that you will tolerate.
Say that again?
Culture is based on the worst behavior you will tolerate. But that's a pretty powerful quote. Their student engagement, I mean, they showed all these videos of the kids in flash mobs. I'm like, who does flash mobs anymore? But it was just one after another. And the kids and the teachers, they're all dressed up. They had an 80s rock star day and the teachers were all wearing wigs. The kids were right in the middle of it. It was neat. They had a lot of school pride and engagement. So another thing that this was interesting. They do PLC also, but he said everybody in the whole district is in the same PLC groups. Teachers, custodial, bus drivers, everybody were all together. I'm like, how does that work? I don't know how you would do that, but the best part, I forgot about this. You guys got to look this up. It's a TEDx talk for El Cajon. And they got these kids standing on the stage like this, mic'd up, dressed to the nines, talking about bullying. And I mean, this one kid, Jose, oh my gosh, can't remember his last name. He was a third grader and you thought he'd been public speaking for 40 years. It was amazing. And then a young little gal that she transitioned in, she was Muslim and she transitioned to wearing the scarf. And she talked about when she decided she was ready and how she was going to go to school and go, this is me now. And it was neat. If anybody wants to know, I can give you the names of them because I got them locked away in my Mac here. But the TEDx talks for El Cajon, it's really something. So it was neat. It's something we could do. It'd be really fun. It was neat. So yeah, that's about the end of my list. So okay, you're up, Doug.
So I think I went to 7 of these and it's always, and one of the things I enjoy about this conference is you get to talk to people from all over the country. I talked to 4 different board members from 3 different districts in Alaska. The last person I talked to, their district boundary was the size of West Virginia. And they had 4,000 students. And their challenge, because we all have different challenges, it's one of the things that is really interesting about going to this. 25% of their budget is spent on shipping and heating buildings. That's it. So a quarter of their budget just gets stuff to the building and keeps it warm. So a lot different challenge. They have no local option budget. They don't, it's all just state funded. So it's always interesting. And a lot of folks from Alaska this year, for some reason, I think may have had something to do with being in San Diego, but I did go to the board self-evaluation. I won't add any more to what you said, Nicole, but other than two things, I said I wouldn't add anything more except for 2 things. Are we modeling the behavior we want our students to model? That was a key message I think we all need to take to heart. And I think we need to add a board self-evaluation using, or at least reviewing this tool and looking at this tool to one of our work meetings, because I think it adds a tremendous amount of value. Is we as a governing board, you have to look in the mirror. You have to make sure that what you're doing is useful and adding value, as well as understanding where your lane is and staying in that lane. So I did do that. Later on, I went to navigating the pressure points. Now, I thought this was interesting because I thought it was going to be something about, talk about curriculum and talk about whatever's coming up that's going to create a lot of pressure. And it was more, there were really 4 points. Staff shortages, I think, was one. I won't bring anything else up other than just to say they talked a little bit about staff shortages. A second was about safety and instituting community confidence in your organization and your district. Talked about things like cameras and mental health and how do we do that? How do we make sure that nurses are available? The critical point, I think, Kylie and Tim, what I would want us, or would like for us to bring up for a board discussion, is talking about aging facilities, capital planning, and deferred maintenance. They brought up this thing, and I had to write it down because I kept asking them. It's called a Facility Condition Index study. Have you ever heard of that, Kylie or Tim? I hadn't either, and I think we do something similar. As I looked into it, is like, how old is stuff and what's it going to cost you to maintain it, right? What are your costs? But they talk about an organization as APPA, and I honestly can't remember what I think if we looked that up, we could find their website. But it was really about understanding what your infrastructure was, the condition it was in, and what the replacement value and maintenance costs would be associated. We have a lot of new facilities. And so our maintenance and infrastructure costs are going to be lower now because everything's new. But as time goes on, we need to just understand what may be coming up. So that's really an important piece. Went to a third one. It's creating winning board culture without losing to politics. Talked a lot about making sure that when we have conversations, especially when we disagree on a topic or an idea, that we understand the human side of it. We understand that everyone's got a family of some sort. Everyone has personal experiences, and understanding, making sure that we temper our arguments with that we disagree with ideas and not necessarily with people. I think it's an important piece of that. We did talk a lot about governance and behavior and board superintendent relationship and student results, and how to approach those through an ethical manner, clearly understanding what your own ethics are within your board. Having a board member code of conduct, which we have something similar to that in our handbook. We also went to a strategically using data to evaluate district leadership. So it's a reflection on us rather than, or us and district leadership rather than a focus on classified and certified staff. So that we did talk about the mantra was have good data and information to help you, to prevent you from making dumb decisions. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. So the Sunday keynote was interesting. And then the final session that I attended before we jetted off to the airport was examining school board and superintendent relationships and understanding how that serves students today and beyond the pandemic. They talked a lot about, there's a lot of conversation around learning loss and those discussions. And one of their points was that it's almost, or through the pandemic, it's almost a re-baseline. We need to understand what we learned and how do we apply it. We've all gone through it. We've all lived through it. We've all learned stuff. So what, right? What are we going to do with that information? How are we going to change what we're doing right now based on what we've learned? So those were the sessions that I attended. I think those are some of the ideas that I'd like us to bring back. I think number one, and I think Nicole would agree with me, is the first thing we should attack is the board evaluation. I think that we've done that in the past where we said, how do you, we've given two different scores. It was a board score as a whole and then a score as you individually, but we haven't really.
Sometimes I felt like it's kind of like they say with Congress, like everybody says Congress, they give them a really low score, but my congressman does great.
Right, exactly.
Kind of give you that same thing.
I think those conferences are worthwhile. I think it allows you to get and gain a different insight, different perspective, certainly from the challenge point of view. Different districts have so many different challenges than we do. I forget I forget what district it was. They have like 85 different languages spoken in their district. They do. I mean, that's a different challenge that districts have, and so sometimes we need to be really thankful for the challenges that we have because there are other issues out there. Any final comments on the conference from any board members?
I would just like to add, if any of you have any handouts, information, notes, et cetera, that you would like me to put in the library on board docs. We had done that historically, and then there hasn't been a conference in a while. So if you have any materials, or just, even if it's just a quick, like, hey, put this out there so that in the future, if we want to look back at it, we can say, oh yeah, we did want to talk about this at some point. Please send that information to me.
So they still have their application up, and within that application, there's a resources tab. And so we need to figure out how to get you connected to those resources.
Okay.
Because it would be very handy to pull down that evaluation that they.
Yeah,
so anything that you heard us
if
talk
there's
about
a
tonight.
link, someone can send me to those
I
resources.
think I saved that already, so I can send it to you.
Yeah, if you would forward that to me, I'll get it out in the library on board docs so everyone can access it. Thank you.
Moving on to informal discussion presentation, cell phone use in schools. Nels?
Yeah, so just kind of doing a little thinking, been hearing random comments about things, and just there's no doubt that smartphones have remarkable capabilities, which in theory could promote student learning. But the truth is that kids, in spite of best efforts of parents and teachers, use their phones primarily to access digital amusements. So it's just went on to kind of looking at various things, distracted learning. A few teachers, I don't know how many, if it's 1 or 100, that feel that they spend all day either policing cell phones or feeling they're not getting listened to. So that's kind of what some of the studies were showing as well, that This it's pretty tough to learn when you've got divided attention. And an illusion of safety that parents think their children, they can reach them anytime they need, but in order to do that, you got to monitor it continually. And then that opens you up to defending your honor on all your online social media accounts the whole time. So just wanted to, I don't really even know what our policies are in the classroom or in the schools. Are we experiencing issues? Is it a problem that we need to think about? Is it totally not a problem? I just thought it would be something that I think we should understand how it's affecting our schools. It'd be good to look at. Do we have, are the policies in place good and we don't need to do anything, or do we need to look at doing something different? I don't know the answer to that right now, but I can definitely see they're becoming more and more prominent, and especially you hear about all this TikTok stuff that's driving kids to things that shouldn't be doing, and just something I think we need to look at, and definitely can't get in front of it. We're already behind it, but it'd be nice to understand where we're at with it and see if we need to do anything different.
Do you have something we need to ask Dr. Burke to pull together? What?
I guess I would probably like to understand what the current policies is at each school, and if there is one, but how it's handled in the classrooms.
So current state.
Yeah, current status. Okay. Yeah, that's what I kind of just start there.
All right. Any questions, Dr. Burke?
We can bring policy and then handbooks. Is there anything else you want in particular?
Yeah, little feedback from administrators would be nice.
Yeah.
And I think teacher feedback, their thoughts, I think.
Too, yes. That's what I meant to say.
Okay.
So let's start with, we don't want to go too far. What's reasonable? I mean, I think at least policy and handbooks we need to have that relatively quick. As far as feedback from administrators, teachers.
I think Christopher could probably put a quick survey out to teachers, and we can get something pretty quick from administrators.
All right, very good.
I'm going to tell you, I don't think your issue is going to be with administrators and teachers. I think your issue is going to be with parents. And so
what I kind of had thought when you were bringing this up is that in some ways it's kind of like the mental health stuff, where it has to be kind of a community partnership of everybody working together, because our kids are 18 to 26. And I've definitely seen a huge difference in the effect and everything of cell phone usage from the 18-year-old to the 26-year-old. In that, I mean, that's a pretty short amount of time with 5 different increments there. But also it's their lifestyle. That's how they access, if they keep a calendar, that's how they access their calendar. That's how they tell time. That's, it's their whole world too. So it's not, and there's some addiction issues too associated with it. So it's not, there's no easy solutions. We haven't found easy solutions in our family. So I don't think in a whole community you would find any easy solutions, and maybe even really hard to even define the problems. So
it's a very good observation, because our kids are the same age. I've seen the exact same thing. It's very obvious which ones had a phone and a MacBook at a certain age. They treat it completely differently.
Well, the products are a lot different now too. I mean, these programmer apps are just almost addicted. I mean, you can feel yourself get into it if you let yourself. If you look at it and 15 minutes later, you're going, what happened? I was just sitting here doing this for 5 minutes.
I would recommend, if you get a chance, it's called The Social Dilemma. It's about an hour and a half. I think you can get it.
It's on Netflix.
It's on Netflix, but I think you might be able to just pull it up off your computer too, but well worth your time, but scary.
Yes.
So, but it's called The Social Dilemma.
All right, very good. Move.
Good call.
Moving on to items from Board of Education members for future meetings. Anything to add?
I need to jump in and bring up something for the board. Basically, I talked to Johnson County Community College. I got to meet with Dr. Bound last week. The Johnson County Community College just removed the mask on Monday. And so, to be honest, I've been kind of waiting for that before we went on a tour. So I talked to Dr. Bound about getting the board out there. He is very willing to take us on a tour himself and make that set up. But here's something that I want to throw out and have you think about. I'm only going to be here a couple more months, and Dr. Luttrell is coming. So is this something that you would want to go ahead and do now, or is this something that you would rather wait until July? And then we can get this set up with Dr. Bound and have Dr. Luttrell attend that as well. So I will leave that up to you.
I prefer to wait because he's coming from a district with a very large CTE program.
Right.
He's got far more experience than we do.
I can get what, I told Dr. Bound that you might want to wait, and he said he would definitely set something up, whether we do it recently or we wait till July. Perfect.
Any other items from board members for future meetings? All right, board work calendar, Dr. Burke.
Let's see, I have to think what month we're in. April. So we've covered quite a bit on April, and whatever we didn't cover tonight, we will cover at the next board meeting, except for the SRO contract. We have a 3-year contract with them. And so we'll continue to work with that contract, but everything else that didn't get covered tonight on the calendar will be covered at the next board meeting.
All right, committee reports.
I forgot my notes again. We'll try next time. For the site council meeting at Wolf Creek.
Any committee reports?
This isn't specifically a committee, but the Miami County Chambers of Commerce hosted a nonprofit board member training, which Nicole attended to, and they did do a COMA and a CORA kind of refresh, and but there was 82 people there and 62 nonprofit groups represented, and then there were some people that were more municipality, like rec commissions and stuff like that. But just overall, I think in our community, we're really blessed with a lot of people that give a lot of time to groups and things they don't get paid to do. And we need to be in partnership and collaboration with as many of those people as we can. So it was a good experience.
Good. Any other committee reports?
I did attend the Timber Sage Site Council meeting as a parent, but I will, I don't have my notes, so I will. I'm looking through, I was like, oh, I know it's in here, but I was at a track meet at the same time, so I think I wrote it on something else. But and then I have the Dayton Creek Site Council on Wednesday. Sorry, I forget what today was. So I'm excited to go to that one. I haven't been to one yet for Dayton Creek.
All right. Any other committee reports? We do need an executive session.
About 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
Just to confirm, we skipped past superintendent reports. You're good? Okay.
Oh,
No, it's okay. I just want to confirm.
I thought we skipped items from Board of Education. and stepped
This
in,
is
but that's all
personnel
right.
too, is the reason for the.
They're both personnel. Yeah, well,
It's all personal.
it's all personnel.
Like to have,
Mr. Wilson, Michelle Heckney,
and
Mrs. Heckney.
and then we'll have an invited guest.
Okay. I move that the board recess to executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters of non-elected personnel to protect the privacy interests of an identifiable individual under COMA. Those to be in the session include the Board of Education members, Superintendent of Schools, Assistant Superintendent of Schools, Director of Human Resources, and others as needed, as requested. The executive session will begin at 9:35 and resume no later than 10:05 in this place.
Second.
It's been second and moved to executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters of non-elected personnel under coma. Katie, please collect the vote.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes,
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
approved.
thank you. We're back in session.
Okay, Mr. President, I move the board approve the hiring of Jenny Skibby as assistant principal at Spring Hill Middle School.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to hire Jenny Skibby as assistant principal at Spring Hill Middle School. Any discussion or conversation? Katie, please collect the vote.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
and Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Approved.
Welcome aboard.
Now you can breathe.
Ready for the next
Yeah.
one?
let's go
Okay.
ahead.
Mr. President, I move that the board approve certified contracts and certified and classified pay increases as recommended by the superintendent
Second.
Administrative.
and administrative pay increases as recommended by the superintendent.
Second.
It's moved and seconded that the board approve certified, classified, and administrative
We didn't get
pay
work
increases as recommended by the superintendent.
We need to get work agreements in there somehow. Does the word working agreements need to be in
No, because we did certified and classified.
We just did certified contracts,
I
so
think
the
it's
pay
fine.
increases, we don't have to.
Okay. Do you have the
Good
motion?
question, but yeah.
Motion's correct?
Yeah.
Yep. Mr. Hoffman,
there? Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,